Good morning, New Orleans, and welcome to Dattitude, episode number 108. Friday morning, every Friday, Jeff, Duncan, and I are live talking about mostly the Saints right now as we get into it. And, Dunk, it is hard to believe we're going to get right into it. It is, by the way, we're taking all your comments and questions. Wherever you're watching this live, you can feel free to leave a comment, and we will be glad to read it, show it on the air, and we will answer any questions you may have. Duncan, it's hard to believe. A week ago at this time, we were talking about whether the Saints season was over. I mean, I was making the point that it certainly could be. And without playing a football game, the Saints have gained a full game on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and a half a game on the Atlanta Falcons. And if the Panthers win on Sunday and the Saints defeat the Raiders on Sunday, the Saints will be in a four-way tie in the worst division in football, the NFC South.
Madness. I love it. I love the chaos, man. Look, the Saints are obviously very fortunate right now. They're having one of their worst years, at least one of the worst starts in a decade, and yet they're still in this thing because of the mediocrity of the division. The Bucs are in a tailspin. I mean, they've lost 3 in a row and to not very good teams. I think Tom Brady's distracted, and I think that's had an effect on the rest of the team. And they're just lifeless right now. Once the Ravens figured out how to defend them and what they couldn't stop on the running game, it was over. That game flipped a switch at halftime. So I think the division clearly is up for grabs, and the Saints should have renewed life because of that. They should have motivation because of that. The players said as much this week when we talked to them. So I clearly think there's no reason to give up hope right now on the season because of the way the NFC South looks.
Speaking of the Tampa Bay Bucs, and, the last few weeks we really haven't talked much about Thursday Night Football unless the Saints were involved like they were last week. But it bears repeating. And I don't know, we have to talk about Tampa Bay a little bit because obviously what they do also affects the Saints. I mean, we're getting to the midway point of this season. And now Tampa Bay at 3-5, Atlanta at 3-4, the Saints at 2-5, and Carolina at 2-5. Just what you saw last night. I mean, I got to be honest. I was as bad as Tampa Bay played last week, and as poorly as they played throughout the season. I mean, I said it on Bayou Bets yesterday. I thought they would come out with focus. They did, and told Uncle Big Nick I like Tampa Bay in the first half, and I like Tampa Bay for the game. Got the first half part right. But they made no adjustments, and they are so poorly coached. I thought Bruce Arians was bad. I think Todd Bowles is worse, and they have no continuity whatsoever. Their chemistry is terrible, and Tom Brady doesn't look like he wants to be there.
Yeah, look, I talked to somebody this past week that's pretty familiar with some Bucs players, and the Bucs players are saying that Tom Brady just isn't the same Tom Brady, like mentally. And I think that's pretty telling. I think you can see it. And if players are talking about that, then it's infiltrating the entire locker room and the entire organization, especially Tom Brady. I mean, he's the entire face of that franchise. So yeah. I think it's obviously going to be a lost season, and they're going to have to start over. And I agree with you. Todd Bowles is not getting it done, but I really think a lot of it starts with the players right now. They've lost incentive. This is a classic example. You know what? I have to brag a little bit, man. Every year I pick an over-under total. Usually I pick the ascending team that nobody's thinking about to jump on. Last year I picked the Bengals when I think they were over-under 6 wins.
Yeah,
to start
I bet on them to win a Super Bowl in October at 150-1.
Yeah, I was all over that. So this year I told Zach Ewing, our editor on the betting site, I'm going to go the other way. I'm picking the under, and it was the under Bucs. And you could just see this convergence of factors. You'd won a Super Bowl. You ran it all back last year. It didn't happen for you. And, these guys now look like they're on cruise control in my mind. They were kind of fat and happy. They've gotten second contracts down there. They've gone to a new coaching staff, somewhat new coaching staff. And Tom Brady's at the end. And we're seeing now, not just Tom Brady, but Aaron Rodgers is starting to drop off. We saw it here firsthand with Drew Brees. It happens. Father Time's unbeaten, and right now he's taking it out on Tom Brady.
There is no question, and that team is, as dysfunctional as the Saints have been, I mean, if you're a Bucs fan, you got to be more concerned than if you're a Saints fan because, I mean, the Bucs still have Super Bowl talent. There's no question in my mind. You look at that wide receiving core they don't have the injury problems. They've had some injury problems, but not what the Saints have had. And they have Tom Brady. And their defense, they obviously had issues in the secondary last night going into the game, but I mean, they still have a pretty solid front line and a good linebacking core, and I don't understand what's going on with them. And so, I mean, it all stems from number 12, and they have issues that I don't know that they're going to be able to fix, which is good news for the Saints. So let's get into the Saints this week. And, obviously the number one topic, I mean, you would think the injury report is the number one topic, but really the number one topic is clearly Andy Dalton basically being named the quote-unquote, and I'm going to put quote marks around this, the permanent starter at quarterback for at least the foreseeable future. Dennis Allen talked about it on Wednesday, and I get that he's, one thing Zach talked about yesterday, and I agree with, it's good in the fact that you're going to go and make a statement and say, look, let's just stop talking about this. I don't want to go back to Jameis Winston right now. This is what I want. That's the choice he made. And so that part of it's good. At least we know now. No one has to ask anymore. But to me, and I said this yesterday on Dattitude, and I still believe this, and I'm guessing you're going to disagree with me. And Reginald Carter says they need to get rid of the quarterback. He is pitiful. That's kind of going where I'm going. And this long-winded thing is this the kind of decision to me that could get a coach fired. Because I've said it before, I'll say it again, and I hope I'm wrong. But Andy Dalton to me is the guy that's going to lead you to 6-11 or 7-10. I mean, he'll be steady. He's not going to be anything special. This team needs to gamble. And to me, the gambling side is Jameis Winston. And if you're going to decide to go with Andy Dalton, I think you know what you're going to get.
No, look, I would agree with you on that. I mean, I think that's really reflective of Dennis Allen, the head coach. He's not going to be a gambler. He's not Sean Payton, right? Sean Payton was willing to be a little brazen and bold, and that's not Dennis Allen. He's going to be a little more conservative, and I think that's exactly what he did in making this decision. He basically picked the lesser of two evils in his mind, and that is, Andy Dalton doesn't have the high ceiling, but he's got a high floor and probably a higher floor than Jameis Winston that we saw. Question. When things go bad with Jameis Winston, it goes really bad.
No question.
I know Dalton had the picks against Arizona, but, I went back and watched that game a couple of times, and he played pretty well in that game. It's some bad luck, man. I mean, the butt ball bounces off Marquez Callaway's fingertips and goes anywhere else. It's an incompletion. Instead, it's a, pick six. And the other one, he gets hit.
The pick in the end zone was awful.
Yeah, that was terrible, but that's that happens in the NFL. Players play, quarterbacks throw picks. So that one obviously he'd like to have back. The other two, I don't blame on him. And that game changed. It changed once they got down 2 touchdowns. It was kind of Arizona had control. So I think they looked at the bigger picture, and I think they looked at the fact that should be getting some of these players back. I would assume at some point, really starting to worry about starting to question these injuries. I mean, if these injuries were not serious enough when they were first diagnosed to put players on the IR, then why didn't they put them on the? You see what I'm saying? I mean,
yeah, absolutely.
They should have put them on the short-term IR and got the roster spot. Or there's something else. There's a real mystery right now to me, and those are key players. Don't get me wrong. Those are three of the three I'm talking about: Jarvis Landry, Marshawn Lattimore, and Michael Thomas. Right. Hard to win games when you're missing key guys like that.
3 empty roster spots for sure.
Yeah, that they've had for over a month. So, I should say Lattimore hasn't been a month yet, but they've got injury issues, and I think. In the long run, Dennis Allen said, you know what, we can live with Andy Dalton. He might not take us to the promised land, but he's not going to fly us into the side of a mountain either.
Jim Derry, Jeff Duncan here on Live Dattitude, as we are every Friday morning at 9:15 a.m. on all these same NOLA.com and bet.NOLA.com YouTube channels. And if you're listening to us on the podcast portion, we thank you for doing that. And we have grown some followers here on Dattitude, and we appreciate you following the podcast as we continue to grow and keep it going. you talk a point, and I don't want to belabor it, but it bears repeating. And I know Dennis Allen's his own man. He wants to be his own coach. He's trying to find his own way. And I defended him for a lot of this season. But to me, if the Saints were 4-3, okay, if the Saints were 5-2, 4-3, somewhere along those lines, I probably wouldn't be as adamant about the move that he's making. But I just don't understand what someone could be thinking. You don't want to take a gamble. You want status quo. Status quo has got you to 2-5. And I mean, you could talk as bad as you want about Jameis Winston and how bad he looked. He won the first game against the Falcons in the fourth quarter and showed his ceiling. Also showed his floor in the same game. He was terrible in the Tampa Bay game, but that's when he was forced to kind of do something because no one else was doing anything. The defense hasn't been very good. And then Carolina, I thought he played well and no one else around him was doing anything. But, man, I don't know what anyone has seen from Andy Dalton over the past 3 or 4 weeks that leads anyone to believe that he can lead this team out of the abyss. It's great that the Saints could possibly be in first place after this week, and I think they'll win. I mean, spoiler alert, we're going to give our game predictions later. I think the Saints match up well against the Raiders, but I don't see anything from this team that leads me to think that they can win 7 out of 10, which is what it's going to take to go to the playoffs and win 9 games.
Well, look, I think he views the two quarterbacks as really not much difference in talent. I think that's pretty clear that he doesn't think there's a big difference there. And so he, leaned on the side of stability and continuity. They've had a lot of moving parts on offense. I think he likes that the offense is kind of settled into a little bit of an identity now as a running attack, the short passing attack. And, yeah, the hiccups against Arizona obviously were concerning. But I think he used the phrase, no reason to upset the apple cart right now.
Right.
So I think that tells you
They're 2-5.
Yeah, he didn't want to change any more change. They've already had a bunch of different players in and out of the lineup. And so I think he feels like we've got that. We know what we are there. Now let's try and get the defensive issues fixed. And look, I would say this. I've seen a lot of stuff on social media, as always, a lot of wrong-headed stuff. I hate to say it. But if people think that Dennis Allen and the offensive staff did not talk to the leaders of this team behind closed doors about this decision, they're crazy.
Yeah, I completely agree with that.
You they've talked to every player in that locker room and they're okay with this move. Now that's not an indictment of Jameis Winston. It's more of we're fine. We like Andy. We're going with Andy. They're not going to divide the locker room and make a decision this big without talking to key players. So get that out of your head.
Zach and I have disagreed about a few things over the past couple of weeks, but one thing that I think we do agree on, he brings it up, and I think it's a great point, and it's true. I mean, I agree with you. Obviously, behind the scenes, that this is probably what the players want. But you know what? When you're 2-5, sometimes I don't care about you. Shake up the apple cart. You're 2-5. I mean, shake it up. But let's look. We're going to probably Andy Dalton's going to come up in conversations as we go along. We try to do this in about a 45-minute segment, so that leaves about 30 minutes, and I do want to fit the Pelicans in at the end of the show. So let's talk about the Saints and Raiders matchup. And, like I said, the Raiders have issues of their own. I mean, I don't understand this line at all. I don't understand why the Saints are underdogs at home against a team that has won 2 games this year, both at home against 2 bad football teams in the Denver Broncos and the Houston Texans. So someone's going to have to explain this line to me. And now it looks like, Devontae Adams hasn't practiced 2 games in a row. If they don't have him, they're in as big a world of hurt on offense as the Saints are.
Yeah, look, I think there's a couple things that go into this line, in my opinion. One, I think the Raiders actually are better than people think. I actually think they're a pretty good team, but they've had some bad, crazy luck. I mean, the game they lost, didn't they lose to the Cardinals this year where they fumbled and,
Yes.
Hunter Renfrow. I don't think Hunter Renfrow fumbled in 2 years or something. I think they're more competitive and better than people think. And I think these Saints injuries are just I don't use them as an excuse, but this staff has been unable to overcome them. And between losing guys like Marshawn Lattimore, Michael Thomas, those are difference makers.
No, there's no
They
doubt.
don't have another Marshawn Lattimore. They don't have another Michael Thomas. And that's evident when a guy like Callaway drops a ball right in his hands. It goes the other way for a pick six. And then the thing that I'm starting to see, and we haven't gotten into this much. I mean, I think we have before a little bit, but when I watch the replay of these games, one of the things I really concentrate on is body language and effort and intensity. And I just don't see it very much. Look, they're playing hard, but they're not playing with zeal. They're not running to the football. The reason they've had 4 defensive takeaways returned for touchdowns in part is because people aren't pursuing the ball once it's turned over. You got to pursue the ball. You got to get after it. And I just feel like this team has lacked that all year long from the opening game. I mean, they slept walked through 3 quarters against the Atlanta Falcons before they turned it on. They just lack that intensity. Maybe they need Sean Payton just to come back for game days and give everybody that look on the sidelines to amp everybody up, because they just don't seem to have the juice. And when things go bad, there's a quick letdown. And I don't know if you can flip the switch mid-season and turn that around.
The closest thing that they played to 4 full quarters was in a loss to Minnesota. They started off a little slow. I think by the end of the first quarter, they had started to figure it out, and then they turned it on. And they played, actually, I thought, their best game of the year after they finally turned it on. But to say that you're this far into a season and you haven't seen 4 full quarters yet is kind of scary, and they need to figure that out quickly. To show where the Saints, the matchups, the Saints 8th in rushing offense, 8th in passing offense. Now, you want to talk about Andy Dalton, and I'm not going to harp on it much longer, but the Saints were 9th in passing offense with Jameis Winston at quarterback, and now they're 8th in passing offense. So they're the same. So that goes to your point where maybe, and it goes to Zach's point, maybe they are the same quarterback. But again, we talk about the different ceiling. It's the defense and certain parts of the defense that have been scary, and the turnover issues. You've got to win the turnover. We've been hearing this for years and years and years. Jim Mora preached about this over, and it was turnover margin and it was time of possession with Jim Mora, and that's why the Saints won. Sean Payton wasn't probably quite as much about time of possession. He probably didn't care as much, although that was important to him. Turnover battle was key in any team winning, and for the Saints to only have 1 interception at this point is just insane. They're going to have to find a way to get to Derek Carr and force him to throw in bad throws this week.
Yeah, look, I go back to what I just said about the intangibles, the focus and intensity. You don't lead the league in giveaways and false start penalties if you're a focused team. You don't. Those are 2 focus and intensity type of statistics, and the Saints are the worst in the league at both of them. So to me, that's what people are missing. Everybody's looking for the reasons. They're looking for scapegoats of individual players. Tackling, that's another thing that's intensity. We've seen some sloppy tackling. They're not among the worst in the league. I put that out this week. I mean, they're only 17th in missed tackles, but that's still a sign, especially from this defense that's tackled so well, that they're just not focused. They don't have that edge that you have to have at this high level. I mean, it only takes just a little slip and you end up 2-5.
That's right.
The Saints aren't overly talented, and they've had some players drop off. I mean, I think it's pretty clear defensive tackle has to be a high priority in the offseason. They're getting nothing from their defensive tackles. None of them. All 4 in the rotation are not producing much of anything. And that's having a domino effect on the run defense, because the way the Saints play defense, they want their defensive linemen, especially their defensive tackles, to eat up offensive line blocks, keep their linebackers free to roam sideline to sideline. And when those offensive linemen are getting hats out on Demario Davis and Pete Werner, next thing you know, it's 5 yards a carry. And that's kind of where they're at on the run defense. And that has definitely not been the standard for this team. And that's kind of where their defense starts.
All right, I've been pretty negative so far, so let me bring up a positive. One thing I did like that I've seen this week is I've been kind of harping on Demario Davis a little bit, because there have been times, and every game that I've been to that they've lost so far, Demario Davis doesn't want to talk to anybody, and I saw a shift in his attitude. I mean, you're the captain. You got to stand up there, not just to the media, but you got to. and we don't see behind closed doors, but the fact that it was vocal this week and him coming out and saying, we got to step up. We got to do things differently. And Alvin Kamara coming out and saying, we got to get our Saints swag back. And I like hearing the things that those two guys are supposed to be. And Alvin Kamara is a quiet leader. I mean, we know he's not out there talking smack. He's not out there. He's not a rah-rah guy. But I'm finally hearing from guys other than Cam Jordan. Other than Cam Jordan, I'm hearing something. I'm hearing them step up and say, this is unacceptable. And so to me, that's step number one. Whether it will translate to the field on Sunday, we're going to find out really soon. But to hear that was a positive thing. And I think someone needs to step up and change this attitude.
Yeah, look, it's good to hear, but you said it. I mean, it's got to translate to the field. And I'll believe it when I see it. I'm sorry, but we're 7 weeks in. At this point, I kind of know what I've got here with this team. I mean, I heard a lot of the same things from the Bucs players this week. Devin White, Levante David, their defense is going to step up, and they gave up 250 yards rushing last night. So,
most of it in the second half, which shows they made no adjustments whatsoever at halftime. Like they didn't see that the Ravens weren't moving the ball, throwing the ball in the first half. Like they didn't know that the Ravens would go back to Lamar Jackson running the football. And even after Gus Edwards got hurt, they were still running the football all right down Tampa Bay's throat.
I know.
No adjustments whatsoever.
Not hard. But it also speaks to like where the Bucs are at, right? They know what's coming. They still can't stop it. And I think this is a tough matchup this week. I know we'll talk later on, but I think the Raiders present a lot of issues for the Saints, especially with their secondary banged up. If Devontae Adams can't go, I think it's an illness. I don't know what kind of illness he's got, but I saw like they had 4
I think there's a good chance he's going to play. But, I mean, even the fact that he hasn't practiced Wednesday or Thursday, you got to think he's not going to be the full Devontae Adams.
Right. But he's still pretty darn good.
Oh, yeah, he is.
They've got Darren Waller at tight end and Hunter Renfrow. They've got some threats. Josh Jacobs in the backfield. They got a big, powerful offensive line. They're going to present. I think this is a game where the Saints are going to have to outscore them.
There's no question.
Like Seattle game all over again. They're going to have to make some plays on offense, and they're not going to win this game, 17-16. It's going to be in the 30s or high 20s. So the offense has got to come with its lunch pail. Saints are going to have to run the ball. They're going to have, I think, Taysom Hill involved again, as they have from time to time. He disappeared last week once they got down 14. You can see that's not what the Saints want to do. They don't want to be down 14 having to pass to get back in the game. Teams will let you do that, and I think that's why some of these stats on the Saints I think are misleading. A lot of them are garbage stats. What I mean by that, I'm not discounting it, but the defense is allowing you to get 8 yards a pop, 10 yards a pop. They're playing back deep. They're letting you throw it underneath. Those balls to Juwan Johnson and Marquez Callaway, they'll give you that all day long. They're trading those yards for time off the clock. And once Arizona got that lead and got up, especially once they got that first touchdown in the second half, they managed that game. That's what Sean Payton always talks about, getting control of the game. He used to always say, I want to get control of the game as a play caller. Well, once Cliff Kingsbury got control of that game by the pick sixes, they coached it differently than they would have if it was tied up. So some of these stats are a little misleading because the Saints have piled up a ton because they've been playing from behind because they've turned the ball over so much. They get in these holes and then they're, kind of mop up yards. So I think the way I look at it, look at the 2 times the Saints have had to move the ball at the end of the game with Andy Dalton.
Right.
At the end of the game against the Bengals, they couldn't do it. And against the Vikings, they barely got into field goal range. They had to try a 60-yarder. When they have to move it and defenses are playing them a certain way, that's my problem with Andy Dalton. I've seen that now twice where the game's on the line, you got to be the guy. And I realize he doesn't have his full allotment of receivers, so I give him that. But they've not been able to get it done when they've had to get it done.
Jim Derry, Jeff Duncan here on Dattitude Live. You got about 15 minutes to get any comments or questions you want to get in before we move to our game predictions, which you can give that as well. We'll show it when we get to that portion of the show. And again, we're going to spend about the last 5 minutes of the show talking about the Pelicans because we have ignored them, and they are the best professional franchise in the city of New Orleans right now. I don't think there's any question about that. I mean, maybe it'll change, but at this point, you got to kind of doubt it, right? Anyway, I want to go back to this graphic real quick because I do want to bring out a point. You talk about how, some of these stats are a little misleading. That's kind of my point. The fact that the Saints are third in offense is very misleading. You talk about all the yards they gained last week in the second half against Arizona when the game was over. I mean, I don't think at any point in the second half anyone realistically thought the Saints were going to win that football game. When you give up 3 interceptions in the first half, I don't care whose fault they are, and 2 of them are pick sixes. One's in the end zone. You go drive all the way down the field to extend your lead, and the other 2 are pick sixes. No one realistically thought you're going to win that football game. So some of these offensive numbers are skewed. The passing offensive rank is completely skewed, and it's hard to change that. You talk about with the lack of receiving depth, but the Saints didn't make excuses last year. They were 9-8, and how the hell they finished 9-8 with that team? There's only 2 words that you could say: Sean Payton. I mean, that's the only reason why they finished 9-8, and this team is clearly lacking that. And I understand that there's only one Drew Brees, there's only one Sean Payton. I get that. I'm not asking Dennis Allen to be Sean Payton, but somebody somewhere. And I hope that this Demario Davis and Alvin Kamara thing, it's got to light a fire. They've got to play with heart, and again, got to find a way to get something going, and they just can't. They haven't done that. They haven't done that at all. Spencer the Guru says he agrees with you, Jeff, that the Raiders' offense is underrated. I'm not saying that they're great. They're bad because they are pretty good, and they have the capability to be good as well. 9th in total offense, which is behind the Saints' 3rd, but I don't know. I think the Saints can get pressure on Derek Carr. I think this is the week that the defensive line. You talk about Taysom Hill being more involved in the offense and having to win a shootout, and I do think it's going to be high scoring. But I really think the defensive line is going to play maybe its best game of the year because they can get after that Raiders front.
Well, they need to. I mean, that's, to me, the biggest disappointment has been the defensive line. I know everybody's going to trot out the analytical stats of how many pressures Marcus Davenport has and all that. Man, at some point you got to get to the quarterback. I mean,
right.
You got to get there. I mean, no one's trotting out those kind of numbers with the top sack guys in the league. Aaron Donald, he gets there. You know what I mean? So at some point you've got to get there, and they just haven't shown up enough for me. That should be a strength. Marcus Davenport's in a contract year. He's been healthy. He's played every game. That's a good sign. They've been healthy in the front 7. I mean, the front 7 of this defense is the one area of the team that really hasn't been hammered by injuries. Now, I'll tell you another thing that's hurting them that we really haven't focused on, but it's showing up on tape, is they're missing Trevor Penning at left tackle. There's
no question. We talked about that last week.
Yeah, and now Calvin Throckmorton has really regressed. I mean, he played better last year. He has not played well in filling in for Andres Pete. Was terrible against Arizona. That's no other way to put it. He got exploited. So the left side of their offensive line is really struggling. So I know we focus on Mike Thomas and Jarvis Landry, but that's 2 other starters that they're missing along the line. And so they're not getting the production out of the offensive line at times that they'd like to have as well. So this team's got some hurdles to overcome physically and because of these injuries that I'm not sure they can do it. If things go perfectly and go really well, they can win a game like they did against Seattle. But a lot of things have to go well, and they can't make, obviously, these egregious mistakes.
Spencer the Guru, our own Spencer the Guru, has a question and wants to throw it out there for you. He says, well, first of all, I think Paulson Adebo looks like he's going to play this week. It's starting to trend in that direction. But who is going to guard Devontae Adams if Lattimore, Adebo, and Roby are out? It looks like I think Adebo is going to be the DB1, so he'll probably be on Devontae Adams.
I think they'll mix it up, man. I mean, they pretty much have done that all year. Jamar Chase didn't get defended by one guy. They like to switch things up, kind of create some problems, mix and match on those back end. But what'll be interesting for me along the lines of that question is, okay, Adebo is going to be at one corner. Alante Taylor, the rookie, who I really like, is going to be at the other corner. You're going to have to live with the ups and downs of playing a rookie corner, but I like what I see there. Who plays in the nickel? That, to me, is the biggest question. I mean, since they let go C.J. Gardner-Johnson, who was so good in that role, they really struggled. At first, it looked like Justin Evans was going to be fine, and he has dropped off a cliff. He's not playing with confidence that he had earlier in the year. That Chris Harris is basically a street free agent who can't run anymore, and teams know it, and they go after him. I don't know. I mean, if they get P.J. Williams back, can he play that role? They've got a hole because Bradley Roby's now on IR. That, to me, is a critical hole in the secondary. It'll be alleviated once they get back Marshawn Lattimore. But right now, in this game where you got a guy like Hunter Renfrow who can nickel and dime you to death, and then you got the big play guy in Adams, it's pretty scary. I
don't know the answer to this question. I think the answer is no, that it's not like baseball, what I'm about to ask. But does IR work like baseball, where you can? Does it retroact? Is it retroactive if you were to put Lattimore on the IR? Does it go back to when he hasn't played, or does it start from that date?
No, got to do it then. Yeah, so that's the problem.
Yeah, I mean, then it really doesn't make sense to me that they haven't put at least Michael Thomas. I mean, tell me about. Zach said yesterday he's hearing that Jarvis Landry. I mean, this could be a rest of the season thing.
Yeah, I haven't heard that, but I know that Jarvis Landry has been a major disappointment. I think it goes without saying that they signed him expecting him to be the number 2 receiver or maybe number 3 along with Olave, and it's been a complete bust. There's no other way to sugarcoat it. And if you want to get a teaser potentially to my column on Sunday, depending on how things go, don't be surprised if it's not a Tyrann Mathieu, Jarvis Landry column.
The Honey Badger has been, and I said this yesterday on Bayou Bets, he has been non-existent. He made the one pick, and the only pick the Saints have all year, which is super sad at this point of the year. But he's whiffed on way more tackles than he's made. I don't know what's going on. And to me, when a player of that caliber is playing like that, it's not because of age. I think his heart's not in it.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the thing I like about him is he's out there every game, as opposed to Jarvis Landry, who's not out there. I like that he's playing every day. I think his heart's into it. I just don't know. It reminds me of that speech, and look, I won't go into great detail on this, but I chronicled it in my book From Bags to Riches when Sean Payton, he had a pregame speech before the Saints played the Vikings in the NFC Championship game in 2009. It's one of the epic speeches I didn't hear it, but I've ever been able to document, where he talked to the team before that game and said, look, when you get old, you start living with a little more fear and trepidation. You don't go out at night. If it's raining to go to the grocery store, you'll wait till the next morning. If somebody bumps into you in the bar, and gives you a shoulder, you don't turn around and get into it. You just live a little more cautiously. And he said, look, I guarantee you tomorrow, if we start hitting this man for 3 quarters, by the 4th quarter, he's going to be the old man that doesn't want to go out in the rain. And it was pretty epic. And I think that's what we're seeing a little bit with Tyrann Mathieu.
Maybe it is. But he's got to show up. I mean, the Saints need him, to be frank. They really do. Especially with Lattimore out, they need someone to step up back there. And so far, he has not done so. And it's kind of rough to see. All right, let's talk about. We got about 10 to 15 minutes tops left in this show. Again, I want to switch gears to the Pelicans in a minute. We're going to get our predictions. Now's the time. If you want to give you can leave it on your comment wherever you're watching. We will get to predictions in just a minute. We'll show your prediction on the air. Saints and Raiders this week. I want to talk a little bit about the if we can see anything from the past couple games and what's coming up. Now, a lot of times you can see, is this a bad spot? We talk about good spots, bad spots for teams. Well, where are the Raiders coming off of? They lost to Kansas City in a heartbreaker on a Monday night 3 weeks ago, I guess. Then had their bye. And then last week found a way to beat Houston. But that score is misleading, Dunk, because they were trailing going into the 4th quarter. They figured it out against, to me, the Texans really could be the worst team in football. Now, that being said, they'll probably go out and beat Tennessee this week. But, you look at the Saints. The Saints have been putting up points. They just haven't been able to stop anybody. So I don't think this is a sandwich spot for either team. The Saints don't play till Monday. They're playing another AFC team the next 2 weeks. And meanwhile, for the Raiders, they're playing at Jacksonville next week. Then they're playing the Colts. So it's really a spot in the schedule that, you can't say it's a whole. I don't think the schedule in this instance plays that much of a part.
No, I agree 100%. I mean, I just, watching watching that Raiders game earlier this year when they played Kansas City. I think it was a primetime game.
Yeah,
Monday night. Really impressed with them. I was really impressed in that game. They gave Kansas City everything they wanted. And in my opinion, Kansas City is one of the two best teams in football. So there's a lot of talent there. And I think we're seeing a little bit of the natural transition with a new head coach, and he's implementing, and they just made a trade. He's getting some of his guys in there and trying to do things his way. But I think they're a sleeper team that could slip in like at that number 6 seed in the playoffs or 7 seed, because they've got talent and they're not far off. Put it this way. I like their prospects a lot better than I like the Saints right now.
I don't disagree with that, and I think that their cohesiveness is a little bit better than the Saints. And I really the problem is they're inconsistent. They have not been consistent at all. And they played their best game against Kansas City, and just a 2-point conversion away from winning that football game. But Kansas City is a little inconsistent themselves. They're just so good that they can overcome when they have a bad game. And the Raiders can't, and the Saints can't. They have proven that. So it's going to be an interesting game, and it's time for our predictions. That's where we are right now. Again, last chance to get your prediction in. We'll show it on the air. But Dunk, I kind of think I know where you're going with this. I have not read your prediction. I don't know if you put it online yet, but haven't read it. But I think I know where you're going by all the things you've been saying.
Yeah, I'm definitely picking the Raiders. I think it'll be high scoring. I think this, could go either way. It's one of those games that I think will be close. I'll be surprised if it's not close. But I think the Saints play well. I think they'll play better offensively. The Raiders' defense is nothing to write home about. That's one thing that works in the Saints' favor. If they can get the ground game going, like the Seattle game, I think that is the formula for success. Get the running game going with Kamara and Hill, beat them up front, and then try and go over the top. I mean, I tweeted this out this week, JD. I think it surprised a lot of Saints fans. The Saints lead the league in big plays, 40 yards or more. They've had 11 this year. 8 pass plays of 40 yards or more. I mean, people
also given up quite a few.
Yeah, but they lead the league, in offense. I don't think people realize that. So that's the formula. You run, and then you go over the top like they did with Rashid Shaheed last week and hit the long ball. That's going to be how this offense works. And I think they can hit a few of those against the Raiders because got their safeties also out. He might come back, Jonathan Abrams, but teams have been able to move the ball on the Raiders. I think the Saints will, but defensively, until I see the defense with my own eyes show up, it's hard for me to pick them to hold anybody down right now. I mean, Arizona got well pretty quickly against them. They've been struggling. They scored 9 points against Seattle, and they lit up the Saints, even though I know 14 of those points came from the defense. They kind of put it into neutral once they got that big lead, too. I think they could have scored on the Saints pretty much at will with the way they were tackling.
Reginald Carter says Saints win 24-14. That would be quite a defensive performance. I mean, yeah. So Reginald's seen something from the defense that I don't think neither you nor I have seen as of yet. So you want to get your prediction in. Now's the time to do it. Okay, I'm going to look, I don't know. I have been wrong picking the Saints, obviously, 5 times this year. I don't know why in the hell I have picked the Saints 7 games in a row to win. They should be I don't want to sound like Zach Ewing, but they should be 4-3. They should maybe even 5-2. I mean, they've let so many games slip away, and games they shouldn't have lost, they've lost. This is the last chance. I wrote it in my column this week. It's kind of redemption week. I was wrong about Tampa Bay last night, although I did get them right in the teaser part of things. So they did cover the teaser end, and the Saints, I have them as the other leg. To me, kind of what you said about a lot of points being scored. If you want to bet on this game, I wouldn't bet on the Saints, but I would bet the over. I think it is going to be a high scoring game. I agree with the over 49 portion of this thing, but I think the Saints are going to find a way to win the game. I do. I think they're. I'm not. I don't know if it's the sliver of optimist that's in me or what it is. I agree that we haven't seen what we need to see, but I like what I hear this week. I think the Saints are going to just figure out a way. I think Andy Dalton is going to have one of his better games of the year. And so people can come back at me on Monday and say, see, Derry, you're an idiot. I think that they're going to play. And, I think they're going to win. Let's see. Dazel Magnificent says the Saints win 38-35 with a Lutz field goal and OT. Hey,
I like it.
I think that's a possibility. Turbo Durant says too much number 4 and number 28 all day and beat the Saints and beat Dennis Allen. Must be a Raiders fan. That's okay, Turbo. And look, very possible. Very possible that happens. What else do we have? We have a couple other ones. Uncle Big Nick wants to know, do you think Renfro has a big game from the slot with all the injuries in the Saints secondary?
Yes. Yeah. If I were him in my fantasy league, I'd feel good about it.
There is no question. Reginald wants to know if I'm a Cubs fan. Well, obviously. I mean, so yeah. I mean, in other words, I know losing and I know winning, but in a short little narrow window. So anyway, Dunk's got the Raiders. I've got the Saints. We'll see who's right. And usually Dunk and I are on the same side. We're not on the same side this week. I don't know if that's good or bad. We'll figure it out.
Now, I'll say this real quick, JD. I think if you're a bettor, which obviously we have this podcast for betting, I think the smart play would be the Saints, just because I think it's a toss-up game and you got a home dog. So just in general, I lean that way, taking home dogs in the NFL. So if you're betting, I would say the Saints are the better play. I just feel, maybe having watched this team enough this year, that I'll believe it when I see it, kind of thing. Yeah. But as a bettor, if you're just playing statistical probability of likelihood to win, I think the Saints would be the smart play.
I wholeheartedly agree. And but again, I'm not betting on the Saints. I only put them in a teaser. So to me, to cover my teaser, now that Tampa Bay I already covered at +7, I only need the Saints to cover. They can lose by less than 8. If they lose, they got to lose by less than 8, or they need to win.
Yeah, look, I know we didn't get to the Pels, but real quick on the Pels, they have a huge road trip coming up. Obviously, West Coast. They got to get Brandon Ingram back. I mean, that concussion, I don't know how he's out for 2 weeks from that. I don't want to discount anybody's injury, but come on, man.
We're getting ready to get to that, but we have some late questions. Dazel asked, do you think Dennis Allen should keep using a 2-quarterback system, meaning Taysom, Hill, and Andy Dalton? I'm not sure it's a 2-quarterback system, but I do think they need to go back to, the game they want against Seattle, and Taysom touched the ball, 9 or 10 times? He needs to touch it at least 9 or 10 times this week.
Well, yeah, they went away from him once they got down 2 touchdowns. They had to start passing, so I understand why they did that. But yeah, that's going to be the bread and butter all year. Taysom Hill is going to be a big part of their offensive game plan every week.
All right, let's shift gears now. And you touched on it, and exactly what we want to talk about here in Dattitude as we look at the upcoming schedule for the Pelicans. They're going on a road trip. I think they play 5 out of their next 6 on the road in the next 3. So they're in Phoenix. Then the good news is at least they go to L.A. and play both the Clippers and Lakers, so they don't have to move around. There's games Sunday, Wednesday, so they'll spend a few days in Los Angeles. You talk about Brandon Ingram not going on this road trip. Pell's already banged up a little bit. Hey, we get to see how deep they are, because they kind of showed their depth in the win over the Mavericks the other night. I mean, as 6-point, I think they ended up as 6-point dogs, ended up winning the game outright after losing to the Jazz. Already Zion Williamson banged up a little bit, which is frustrating. Herb Jones and Zion Williamson both questionable going into this series. How concerned are you right now about Brandon Ingram being hurt? You talked about it a little bit, and Zion already questionable.
Well, I think Brandon Ingram played 55 games last year. That's a concern for me. I mean, he's your second best player, and he has I don't want to call him Anthony Davis, but it's not far off, in my opinion.
Another friend of mine called him Anthony Davis the other night. I don't think we're there yet.
It's bordering. It's bordering on it. But this team is deeper, and I think that's the good thing. I mean, Trey Murphy is sort of a Brandon Ingram light, and Trey Murphy, the Pelicans are really high on him, and you can see why.
Yeah,
I mean, this guy can play. He's gonna be a major part of their club going forward. going to be a core piece. They're going to have to figure out how they get all these young guys signed and keep it together. That's going to be the biggest challenge for David Griffin and Trajan Langdon, because they've got a number of really strong young pieces that are blossoming before their eyes. So I'm not that worried about Ingram because he'll be back. He's a key part for them. But Trey Murphy, I think, can replace him in a lot of ways. It's more about Zion, the fact that he gets banged up so much. I mean, that's going to be the hack-a-shack kind of defensive attempt strategy is going to be in force all year long. And he's going to have to adjust to it and get accustomed to it, because he's not going to get the whistle all the time. It's just not going to happen. Ask Shaquille O'Neal. He didn't get it either. And so that's going to be something that Pels adjust to. But I love their start, 3-1. This is a tough road trip. Phoenix obviously is a talented team. The Clippers are very talented, but the Lakers are in complete disarray. 0-4.
What a mess.
What a mess. And it couldn't have happened to a better franchise.
No doubt about it.
Fans. So look, I'm bullish on the Pels. Bullish on what I'm seeing. I like the chemistry and the camaraderie. I like the enthusiasm they play with. I mean, this team is really, really fun to watch.
Yeah, and you're really going to find out a lot as far as early season goes. Now, obviously, through the course of an 82-game season, things change, and things either develop or they don't. But you're going to find out a lot about this early part of the season with this 3-game road trip, I think, Dunk. Obviously, the Suns are a sort of measuring stick. If they can go out there and play well, if they can find a way to win 2 of these 3 games, that would be a huge boost, I think, for this team going forward. And the more confidence they can gain early in the season, I mean, you look at the ridiculously poor start they had last year. I think it was something like 3-18 or something along those lines. I mean, to already have 3 victories in the bank, if this team can get off to a hot start and beat some of these, playoff caliber teams, the more confidence they can gain early on is only going to lead to them bettering themselves for later on.
Well, and I think the injuries hurt in the continuity piece of this, right? I mean, you're trying to work Zion Williamson back into the rotation. You've got some other pieces off the bench that are kind of stepping into more prominent roles. And then you lose Zion for a game or two. You lose Brandon Ingram. You lose Herb Jones. And it's just kind of stalling that, that time on task with everybody playing together and learning each other's games. I know that Brandon Ingram and Zion Williamson have played together before, but CJ McCollum hasn't played with Zion. So the more time these guys get on the court together in game action, the better. And that's why I think David Griffin was quick to point out in preseason, hey, look, it's going to take us a little time. We're not going to come out of the gate and be gangbusters. So, lower the expectations early on. I think the fact that they're 3-1 is really positive, because if they go on a little bit of a stretch here where they lose a few games, they're not going to end up 3-18 like we saw last year.
Well, Dunk, that's going to about wrap it up here. Next week, we'll be talking about LSU hosting Alabama as well. We got a lot of things to talk about next week. The Saints will be playing on a Monday night, so we may have to talk about our schedule here. We'll still do next Friday, but may have to have you on Monday. May do a live show on the Monday as well, if you can accommodate it in your schedule. I know you got a lot going on.
Yeah, we can make that work. And don't forget, Tulane got a big game next week.
Tulane coming up against Tulsa, playing on the road next Saturday.
For Tulane fans out there, big game Saturday with Central Florida hosting Cincinnati. That's a big game in the conference, because right now it's like a 3-team race between UCF, Cincinnati, and Tulane. Somebody's going to lose in that game, Cincinnati and UCF, and that will have implications because Tulane gets UCF and Cincinnati down the road.
Zach wanted to know earlier in the week, what's the possibility, and I know that the two conferences don't mean the bowl game, but wouldn't it be funny, I don't even know if it's possible, to find a way to get LSU and Tulane in a bowl game together?
That's what a lot of people speculating about that. Certainly would be a possibility. It would be incredible. But
Sugar Bowl?
I think Tulane, obviously, their sights are set on winning the conference, and they go to the Cotton Bowl, which would be incredible in itself to see Tulane in a New Year's Day bowl game. It
really would be. And you know what? It would be well-deserved if they can finish this off and do that. And I would love to see it, because I think Willie Fritz is done a remarkable job. I know they only had a 2-win season last year. They had all kinds of issues, but to see this team back and this program back, I think a lot of it has to do with Willie Fritz and his continued push, and they're buying in, and him getting some of the players that they need to get over there, and it's fun to watch. So we'll be watching Tulane down the stretch. Again, next week, talking about LSU, Alabama. We're talking about Tulane, Tulsa. We'll be talking more about the Pelicans and how their week went against the Suns, the Clippers, and the Lakers on the road. And we'll also be talking a little bit in advance. It won't be as – I mean, we're going to talk about Saints-Ravens. Don't get me wrong. But we're going to be probably looking more about that on Monday. So all kinds of things going on next week. Been fun on Dattitude. And Dunc, thanks for joining us, and we will talk to you next week.
All right, JD. Have a great weekend, buddy. You
too, my friend. All right. That's it. We'll see you next Friday. Thanks for joining the live portion of Dattitude. And a reminder, you can go back and download the podcast on wherever you get your podcast, Apple, Google Play, Stitcher, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast, and you can hear my monologue tagged on to this. It's an interesting one. You can make the decision. We'll see you Monday on Dattitude, Thursday with Uncle Big Nick talking about our picks, and again next Friday at 9:15 with Jeff Duncan. Thanks for joining us. Peace and love, my friends.